Welcome back to Zero Hour Radio. The clock is ticking, the world is quiet, and the darkest corners of history are about to open. Today, we are opening the vault on two of the most chilling verified vanishments in military history. Cases where the machines survived completely intact, but the souls inside evaporated into thin air. Turn down the lights, lock your doors, and let's begin. There is a unique, deeply rooted terror in finding something that should be alive, but is entirely hollow. In the archives of historical anomalies, we often look for crime scenes marked by violence or struggle. But the stories that truly paralyze the imagination are the ones where nothing is broken, yet everyone is gone. We aren't talking about urban legends, but the verified unsolved records of the United States military. To understand this, we must go back to August 16, 1942, during the height of World War II. The U.S. West Coast was gripped by a paralyzing fear of a Japanese naval invasion. Enemy submarines were actively patrolling the waters off California, sinking merchant ships. The U.S. Navy desperately needed eyes in the sky, quickly drafting civilian commercial blimps into military service. One was designated the L-8, operating out of Treasure Island squarely in the middle of San Francisco Bay. It was manned that morning by two seasoned officers, 27-year-old Lieutenant Ernest Cody and 38-year-old Ensign Charles Adams. At exactly 6:03 a.m., the L-8 rose silently into the gray morning mist for a routine 5-hour anti-submarine patrol. The mission was entirely uneventful until 7:38 a.m., when Lieutenant Cody clicked his radio microphone and contacted Command Base. His voice was calm and direct. "Sighted suspicious oil slick. Am investigating. Stand by." Eyewitnesses on nearby ships watched the blimp descend rapidly to hover just 30 feet above the water, circling the slick to drop flare markers. At this moment, the blimp was functioning perfectly, and its two pilots were actively at the controls. Suddenly, the L-8 pulled its nose up cleanly, roared its engines, and climbed steeply into a heavy bank of coastal fog. At 8:50 a.m., controllers tried to contact the crew for a status update. The radio was met with absolute silence. Somewhere inside that silent bank of fog, the hand at the controls had vanished. The aircraft was no longer a weapon of war. It had become a drifting tomb, carried entirely by the wind. What happened next transformed a tragic military disappearance into a public, surreal nightmare. The L-8 rose high above its operational altitude, venting its vital helium gas. Left without human guidance, the airship did something completely inexplicable. It changed direction, drifting straight toward the densely populated urban center of San Francisco. By 10:00 a.m., thousands of civilian onlookers looked up to see a terrifying sight. The L-8 was floating over the city skyline, its massive 150-foot gas envelope deflating and sagging heavily in the middle like a giant gray sausage. One engine had stopped completely. The other sputtered wildly. Its heavy guide ropes whipped against skyscrapers as it lost altitude. Finally, at 11:30 a.m., the sagging mass came to a permanent rest, wedging itself perfectly in the middle of Bellevue Avenue in Daly City. A massive crowd of neighbors, police officers, and firemen rushed toward the crushed, steaming gondola, bracing themselves to pull the bodies of the military crew from the wreckage. Instead, they found absolute emptiness. The forward cabin door was wide open and securely latched back. The 3 military-grade parachutes remained untouched in their storage racks. The emergency rubber life raft sat securely in its bay. The radio was fully powered on and working perfectly. On the instrument panel sat Lieutenant Cody's official military cap resting neatly next to the flight log, which contained no mention of trouble. There was no sign of a struggle, and the fuel tanks were still half full. The Navy's official inquiry posited a rescue cascade, that one man fell out while hovering over the water and the other fell trying to pull him back in. Yet, lookouts on the nearby ships were watching with binoculars during that exact window. They saw the Blimp make a structured powered climb into the clouds with no bodies ever found in the water. The 2 men had simply evaporated into thin air. 13 years after the L-8 Blimp crashed into the streets of California, an even more terrifying, deeply complex ghost vehicle crisis unfolded thousands of miles away in the vast expanses of the South Pacific. This was the mystery of the MV Joyita, a 69-foot custom merchant vessel that began its life as a luxury wooden yacht built for Hollywood actress Thelma Todd. By 1955, the ship was owned by Captain Thomas "Dusty" Miller, a highly experienced British mariner who was drowning in massive financial debt. Facing the imminent repossession of his ship, Miller agreed to a high-stakes commercial run to the remote Tokelau Islands, which were experiencing a critical medical and food shortage. On the morning of October 3, 1955, the Joyita cast off from western Samoa with 25 people on board, including 16 crew and 9 passengers, among them a prominent doctor rushing to perform an emergency amputation. The ship was in shocking disrepair. Its port engine had a broken clutch, and its bilge pumps were disconnected. Yet, Captain Miller was entirely fearless because the Joyita's lower hull had been lined with thick, solid blocks of high-grade cork during a previous refit. To him, the ship was scientifically, physically unsinkable. Even if the hull cracked wide open, it would keep floating indefinitely. But the Joyita never arrived. A massive international search covered 100,000 square miles of the South Pacific, finding absolutely nothing. No debris, no life jackets, no rafts. 5 weeks later, a merchant vessel spotted a dark speck bobbing erratically 600 miles off course near Fiji. As they drew closer, the crew gasped in horror. It was the Joyita, listing heavily to the port side with its deck rail entirely submerged under the water. The upper flying bridge was violently smashed away, and the windows were shattered. There was no sign of life anywhere on deck. When investigators boarded the listing Joyita, the physical clues inside the flooded cabins defied all logical explanation. First, the functional starboard engine was found completely covered in thick, heavy mattresses from the passenger cabins, a desperate, bizarre attempt to muffle a high-pressure pipe leak. In the radio room, the master switch was turned on and set perfectly to the International Maritime Distress Frequency. But when technicians tested the equipment, they found the transmission died within a tiny 2-mile radius. Hidden beneath a fresh coat of marine paint was a complete structural break in the antenna wire. The crew had been frantically screaming for help into the microphone, completely unaware they were broadcasting into absolute nothingness. The discoveries on deck grew progressively darker. Lying open on the weathered wooden planking sat the doctor's official medical bag. Inside were a stethoscope, a sharp scalpel, and 4 lengths of linen bandages deeply stained with dark, freeze-dried human blood. Furthermore, every single firearm from the captain's safe was missing, and 4 tons of commercial cargo had vanished from the holds, yet the valueless empty oil drums remained. Every electric clock on board had stopped at exactly 10:25. The most widely accepted model is a mutiny over the cork, a pipe burst, flooding the lower decks in pitch darkness. The panicked passengers, terrified of sinking, demanded to abandon ship. Captain Miller, knowing his cork hull made the vessel unsinkable, refused. A violent confrontation broke out on the bridge. Miller was struck down, and the doctor frantically wrapped his head in the linen bandages found on deck. The crew then packed 25 people into 3 unpowered rubber life rafts and cast off into the storm, where they were instantly swallowed by the ocean, leaving the unsinkable machine to float away entirely alone. The official files remain open, but for now this frequency goes silent. If these historical anomalies kept you on the edge of your seat, don't let the signal fade. Hit that like button, share this broadcast with fellow truth seekers, and make sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a midnight drop. This is 0 Hour Radio, signing off. Until the next 0 hour, stay alert.